Hey everyone, my name's Taylor. Welcome back to my channel. So today I am doing my reading wrap up. I haven't done one for the past 2 months. I just haven't felt like video recording or anything. So I'm combining February and March into one video. So that's what I'm doing today, and I am in my backyard. It's such a beautiful day today, and I thought, why not talk about books and sit outside while I do it. You'll see my dogs roaming around. Hopefully they won't make too much noise or anything like that. I'm trying to mitigate background noise with the AirPods, but we'll see. But anyways, I'm gonna get into the books I read, starting obviously with February. And the first book I read was the last book in a series, and that is the Restoration series by Terry Blackstock. So the last one is called Dawn's Light. And so this book was a pretty good conclusion to the whole series. I think there's 4 books in the series. I gave it 4 stars, and it wraps up everything pretty nicely. Most of the questions get answered that come up throughout the whole series, but let me back up and explain what the series is about before I get too ahead of myself. So it is about, the first book is about just your average American family. They are a mom and a dad and 4 kids, and the kids' ages I think range from like 9 to 22. And the book opens with the eldest daughter is coming home to prepare for her wedding, and the world, that's like an apocalyptic type of book, I suppose, where everything stops running. Electricity stops running, cars, airplanes, anything electronical in nature that uses any kind of digital anything, which for a lot of cars it's like that. So you have computers in cars, and generators don't work. So basically the whole world is shut down. At the very beginning you don't realize it's the whole world, but eventually it comes in. You realize it's the whole world is being impacted by this event that no one knows what caused it. And what happens whenever people are figuring out how to survive in a basically pre-modern type world where you can't use any modern technology. I have to go back to the basics and figure out how to live. And it's a very interesting series. The first book especially is fast-paced, and as the series overall, I would give 4 stars, solid 4 stars. Like I said, it's very interesting to see how people cope with this, and you know what tactics they do to survive, and people's feelings about it, and how people go into survival mode, and what it means to be a Christian whenever you are struggling to survive and help your family survive. And this one particular family, the Brannings, it follows their journey on how to model Christ in this new world that they're living in. And so the reason why I did not give the whole series 5 stars is because of one character that aggravated me the entire 4 books, which is the eldest daughter, the 22-year-old, and I forget, Denny is her name. And she is not a likable character in the first book. She's very self-absorbed, very full of herself, and somehow the situation that is happening that's impacting everybody is mostly impacting her and ruining her wedding and all of that. So she's kind of hard to take in, and she does go through a lot of character growth throughout the 4 books, which is good. It just took a long time, and you think that she's made some progress, and then she would make a decision. You're like, really? Why would you do that? And that was the case several times. She did that several times, like a repeating pattern. It's a bug. throughout the whole series, and it took a while for her to grow up. But yeah, she was one of my major things. I kind of get that, you know, sometimes people take a while to change, so maybe it was realistic timing, but it was still kind of irritating to read about. But other than that, the whole family dynamics was really good. The setting, the world that Terry Blackstock, she really explained it really well. So I highly recommend the Restoration series. The next book I read was Counted with the Stars, and this book is pretty popular. It's gotten a lot of good reviews, and I was really wanting to read it anyway because it's a biblical fiction book, and it follows the time frame of the plagues of Egypt, the Exodus time period, and I wanted to read it while I was reading Exodus because I am doing a year in the Bible Bible study, and I thought, what a great way to pair reading the Bible and then a fiction book surrounding that time period. And I know that this book was actually the Christian Booktuber book club pick for February, I think, so it just happened to work out that way. And it's nice to see everybody talking about it as well. But this book is about Kaya, and she is an Egyptian slave. Her family got into debt, and so her father sold her into slavery, and so she has a little bit of a unique situation going on because, you know, most slaves at that point were Hebrew slaves, but she is an Egyptian slave, and so she's serving this wealthy household, and meanwhile the plagues are going on, and so she eventually leaves with the Hebrews for certain reasons. So I loved this book. It definitely deserves all the good things that are said about it, and I gave it 5 stars, and it was very, very interesting to see the Egyptian perspective of the plagues. Like the Bible goes through the plagues and you kind of you know what happens, but as far as like experiencing it, I don't think I could fully wrap my mind around it until this book. This book really helped make it real for me, because you know, all of them were quite unpleasant. I'm sure for people who had to live through it and experience it, but the level of difficulty and you know, discomfort and disgustingness and all of that was, I definitely felt it a lot more because of this book, and it was just really, really interesting. So Kaya, obviously she is an Egyptian, so she worships the all the Egyptian gods and stuff. So because of her situation, she builds up distrust and like doesn't really worship the gods, but that makes her distrustful of the one and only God. And even though she follows the Hebrews out of Egypt, she still is skeptical, even though she sees, you know, all of this happened and around her, and there's just confusion about, you know, why the plagues happened and what is this pillar of cloud and fire and all of that. And so eventually, you know, you see her faith growing throughout the book, and that's really, really beautiful to see. I really am so glad I picked this up, and it's my first ever biblical fiction era book. And I'm really looking forward to reading more of these. I think I'm gonna like the ones that aren't about a biblical character specifically, like during the time period where they might be like side characters and things like that. I feel like, let me know what y'all think. I feel like with a biblical fiction book about a biblical person, I feel like it might be confusing, like what's fiction and what's real in the Bible. Let me know what y'all think about that. Maybe that's just a weird thing that I'm fearful of. But I did really enjoy a side character during the Exodus time period, so highly recommend this one. The next book I read in February was Authentically Izzy, which is a very hyped book when it first came out. It's a recent release, I do believe, by Pepper Basham, and I gave it 4 stars. The cover is absolutely adorable. I love it. It just screams February to me, and love and romance, so I was I was intrigued by the cover initially, and then everybody kept talking about it, and it just sounded really cute. So I picked it up, and it is about a librarian. Her name's Izzy, obviously, and she lives in the Blue Ridge Mountains, specifically the same town that Andy Griffith is set in, which is really cool to see. I forget what it's called. I haven't really watched Andy Griffith. I'm aware of it, but I didn't grow up watching it, but maybe one day I'll get around to it. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but anywho, so she is single, and her family, one family member especially, is worried that she's not going to find anybody. She doesn't have really much of a dating life. She had bad experiences and things like that. So she sets her up on this, the trope where set her up on this online dating app to get her to meet people or meet men. And so Izzy kind of just doesn't want that to happen, but she ends up meeting this guy who seems too good to be true. His name's Brody, and he is from this island, this fictional island. Started with an S. I can't remember. I can't remember what it's called, but it sounds beautiful. It's supposed to be a combination of Scotland and Scottish and English people. So the culture is really unique, and I'm all about Scotland and England, so it was very fascinating to read, and it sounded absolutely picturesque. I wish this was a real place. I would totally want to visit it. But anyways, so he seems too good to be true, and it is a love story between those two. And so yeah, I gave it 4 stars. It was very enjoyable, very funny. It has a lot of literary references, which, as book readers, we can really appreciate the humor and the use of those. It is a book mainly written in letter form, via emails, actually. Emails, iMessages, and text messages. So a lot of people have said they found that hard to read, but I didn't really have an issue with it. I will say, if you do, I highly recommend the audiobook. It was very, very helpful, and it was a full cast of characters. Every character had a different voice, and that was so refreshing. I don't know why audiobooks don't do that more. Like, can we not use more than one person's voice? I don't like it when a person of the opposite gender does a different voice for the other gender. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent, but the audiobook for Authentically Izzy is extremely well done. I highly recommend the audiobook. I paired both and read and listened to it at the same time. And yeah, so that is that book. It's a very fun read, and I would say it's probably worth the hype. Hopefully you can see this pretty good. Okay, so the next book I read was The Rose and the Thistle by Laura France, and this one again came out recently, so a lot of people have been talking about it. And I usually don't get to new releases this quickly, but I was very surprised it was on Hoopla, so I took advantage of it because it is a historical romance, and those are right up my alley. Set in Scotland, and it is about an English woman whose father is a Jacobite sympathizer. He's English, but he really believes in the cause of the Jacobites, and so he is a traitor to the crown. And to protect his daughter, he sends her to his friend's castle. I was about to say his friend's house, but it's a castle. And so technically these people are her godparents, but it turns out that the godfather passed away recently, so it's his son that inherited the lairdship, I should say, the lairdship. And his name's Everard, and he is not enthusiastic about housing a trader's daughter, because that puts him in a precarious position, especially as a new laird. But he does take her in, and it is their romance. Her name is Blythe, and Lady Blythe, and his name's Everard. So I gave this book 4 stars. I had a few issues with it. Like I really enjoyed the premise behind it. It was a very sweet idea. Like the plot line was very, very good. I enjoyed it. I did have a few issues with it as far as like the descriptions of their romance. I felt like could have been more fleshed out. Not enough detail. It felt like they were kind of against each other, like kind of rivals, and then there was this physical attraction, and then boom, we love each other so much. And maybe that's just a me thing, maybe her writing style, because I had similar issues with A Bound Heart. I just felt like the romance wasn't very well described, so maybe it's a me thing, but I just felt like it could have been written more into that. The book also itself is pretty long. It's like close to 500 pages, so I think some of that could have been cut out, because it kind of seemed a little bit draggy to me. But I did, like I said, enjoy the plot line. It was also another opportunity to learn more about something in Scottish history. I did know a little bit already about Culloden because of Outlander, but this time period is set before that, during the Rising, which was the major Scottish rebellion before Culloden. So it was interesting to read a little bit more and learn a little bit more about that particular time frame in Scottish history, so I appreciated it for that as well. So we're getting into the books that I read in March. And so the first one is Brand of Light by Ronnie Kindig? Yeah, Kindig. I really wanted to like this book. It was actually a gift from Jason, and thank you, Jason, for sending this to me. I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to read it, because look at it. It's so pretty. Such a pretty cover. Let me explain the premise. So it is about a girl, what's her name? I forget. Kirsty. Kirsty lives on a planet where they don't believe in using technology, and so she has this brand on her arm, and she doesn't know why or how it's there. It causes some trouble for her, and anyways, so unrelated to that, she ends up being blamed for the murder of her entire clan, her family and her clan, and so she's kind of the scapegoat for that. And there is a hunter named Marco, and he is sent to retrieve her and take her to a place that kind of like a bounty hunter type thing, that some people want to take her to. I know that's pretty vague, but it is set in, obviously it's a science fiction book because it is set in a universe that does not have Earth in it. There's like a map in here of like all the different planets and stuff. So like I said, I like science fiction. I like otherworldliness. I like space. I like space drama. There's a romance between Kirsty and Marco. And kind of like the, he's hunting her and they end up falling in love trope. And like I said, I really wanted to like this book, and I feel so guilty because this was a gift and I really wanted to like it. However, I gave this book 2 stars, and I just had so many feelings about this book. So the main issue I have was the writing. The writing was not for me. It was very hard to follow. I think I'm pretty good at picking up and understanding things because I have read fantasy a lot in the past. But I just felt like things were not explained well at all, because I swear it took me at least half the book to figure out what was going on, and then I didn't even fully understand what was going on. There were things like, for example, at the beginning of the book, she's jousting with somebody. She's like a warrior type person. She's trying to prove herself because it goes against the norms of her traditional society. So she's jousting in the beginning, but the way it's described, it's like you eventually figure out it's jousting, but why could we not say it's jousting or describe it better so you know it's jousting, but it's called something else? And she was riding a creature, and I'm like, okay, is this a horse or is this some other type of creature that's indigenous to the planet? And then, like, much later on in the book, we find out it's a horse. So I couldn't picture what was happening, really. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna say it's jousting. It turns out it's probably what it was. But it was like that. The whole book was like that, where you're like, I think this is what she's trying to describe, but I'm not 100% sure. Sometimes it was fully described, like towards the end of the book, and sometimes it wasn't described at all, like wasn't explained. And then she like renamed everything. She like, if I understand it's other worlds and they're going to have different words for things, but it's like you were thrown into this world and just expected to know the vocabulary for it. It's very irritating because they had different words for a king, different word for a clan or a tribe, a different word for a religious leader, and you're just like, and they just say what it is, and you have to kind of figure out context clues what they are, and it's very it's very irritating. And there was something that was very integral to the book, like Marco, I guess this is supposed to be Marco. He has like this supernatural ability to hunt people because through smell. Like he can smell emotions, so that helps him find people. And that part was not fully described, like how his work happens or how it occurs or that process, until 3/4 of the way through the book. Like you as the reader had to figure that out on your own. But then Percy asks him, how does it work? And then he's like, oh, this is how it works. And I'm like, okay, it's nice to get validation that I'm right. That's what was happening the entire book. I feel like the author could have done a lot better job explaining that to the reader and still have the character kind of, in the dark. There is a way to do that, but the way she wrote, the reader was in the dark for the whole book, pretty much. So anyways, enough about that. I am beating on this book so much. Yeah, towards the end, there is a scene that in particular was it just created more questions. The fantastical element, he also has a brand on his arm, by the way. So that's how they're connected. That's how they are destined for each other. And that is explained a little bit at the end of the book, but again, something happens, there's a scene that happens, and just creates more questions. I know this is the first book in a series, but I don't know. Anyways, the ending, oh my goodness. The ending was awful. I know that, sometimes authors do things that make the reader very angry and upset, and, it's all for the pushing of the story and, like a cliffhanger and make you come back to the second book. No, I will not be continuing with this series. It made me that mad, and I don't get that mad about, like, I can roll with a good bit, but this just made me so irritated, so disappointed in how something turned out. and it was just disgusting to me. I can't get past it. And I told you I have some feelings about this book, and I don't usually have this hard feelings, but yeah. So I skimmed a lot of this book because of the poor explanations. I'm just like, there's no point in me trying too hard to understand this, because she's not going to explain it. And also, there were a lot of different perspectives, which made it more difficult to read. And the last thing I'll say about this book, if you are wanting to read this still, if I haven't discouraged you from it, I'm trying not to. This is my personal opinion. There is a trigger warning for rape in this book, so please be aware of that if that is something that you can't read. It is present in this book, and so yeah, I'm gonna stop talking about this and dragging it through the mud, because there were some things I liked about it. Like, I like the idea of it. The cover is really good, and I hate ripping into someone's work like that, but it just wasn't for me. Some people might like it, so if you're a big sci-fi person, you might want to pick it up still. So anyways, moving on. The last book I read in March, I was trying to think of what month. So it was A Reluctant Bride by Jody Headland. I gave this book 3 stars, and I had moved on to this book because I needed something quick and easy to read after the experience of the last book. I needed a refresher, and that definitely fit the bill for me. It's a historical romance, so those are good palate cleansers for me. They're a comfort read, basically. So this book is about Mercy, and she lives in poverty in England, and so her life is not easy. She's basically starving. That time period, like Dickens type era, people, I don't know how, like, a lot of people died, so I was about to say, I don't know how anybody survived that life, because it was very unsanitary and difficult. But anyways, so she finds herself on a ship going to a new colony in British Columbia. Yeah, British Columbia. So she does not realize that she ends up getting a last minute spot, and she does not realize this ship is a bride ship. So she does not want to get married. She has nothing to do with marriage. She has bad experience with seeing poor marriages, so she has no interest, but she goes along with it. So there is a ship surgeon on the voyage as well. His name is Joseph, and he is breaking societal norms by being a doctor, because he is actually in the nobility. He is a lord. He's titled, I forget what his title is, but he's pretty high up there in the English hierarchy. So it's like a big no-no that he is a doctor, but he wanted to do something different with his life because his family perished due to a fever or something. But anyways, he's on the ship too, and basically, like, she's supposed to be getting married to a man in the colonies, or in this colony, and a forbidden romance ensues with this doctor. And it was a cute book. I can't remember, I think I said it, I gave it 3 stars, but the end note that the author wrote, everything, all the events, even the couple, is based off of real life events. She just added, you know, fictional liberty to describe like the actual people, to describe people and make it fictional people, but based off of a real romance, and a real bride ship went out to this particular colony. So I thought that was really interesting, and I appreciated it a lot more because I love real life romances like that. So it was really interesting. In addition to reading Christian fiction, I also have been trying to read through the Bible chronologically. And I've been doing that with the Daily Grace Co. I think I've mentioned it before in a couple of videos. And I'm behind, but that's okay. I'm still making it. But I read Leviticus and Numbers for February and March. And I just wanted to say, Leviticus especially, everybody talks about it being a difficult book to read. It's almost like a horror story type of thing. Like, it's so boring and hard to get through. So I was kind of prepared for that, that it would be difficult. And I'm glad I powered through with the help of the Daily Grace Co. podcast. They helped break it down and make it more digestible. It was very dry. But I think if I hadn't had that resource, I would have given up. But because I did, I could see how it would relate to Jesus and point towards Jesus. So that was very, very helpful. I'm really glad that that was a resource and I chose to use it, because it made it more impactful and understandable that way. If I'd read it just on my own, I would have been like, it doesn't make any sense why all these sacrifices are happening, but lots of blood and specific things that they had to do is just very, very difficult to follow and get through. But basically what I learned from it is that we can never fulfill the law. You know, God is God and God is holy and we are not. So Jesus is our perfect sacrifice, our high priest, our interceder. So just the parallel of the best we could get close to by doing these sacrifices and having the high priest. That's as close as we could come, but it still wasn't enough. So Jesus came for us. And then also, especially in Numbers too, the faithfulness of God. And it seems like on the surface level, when you're just reading it, it seems like God is very, doesn't give them any slack, I guess is one way to put it, like very harsh. But in reality, whenever you break it down, which I think a lot of people who take scripture out of context can, another way people can misuse scripture. But the point of it is that these people sinned and there is a consequence to sin, but throughout the whole time God still took care of them and provided for them, and he could have wiped them out. God has that ability, but he took care of them and he provided for them and still called them his people, and he was faithful to his covenant and all of that. And then also, you know, it's really easy to blame the Israelites and be like, why did you do this? Like, because it's constantly like God would do this glorious thing for them and save them, and then the next thing you know, they turn around and we're like, we didn't want to go back to Egypt, it's so much better life, and blah blah blah. And it's easy to be like, what are you doing? But it is, you know, off, like, having trouble with words. But we do that too, you know. I know I do. Take for granted the blessings that God sends my way, or forget what God does for me and complain. You know, it's human nature. We're in a sinful world. We are sinful creatures, so it's a constant coming back to God and asking for forgiveness type of thing. So anyway, so that's what I learned in a nutshell from Leviticus and Numbers, reading it for the first time. And I've mentioned this before, but I've been using the Eat into Eternity materials. It goes along with the podcast, but I purchased these materials and I have been successful in using them, and they've been very, very helpful. So they are a bit pricey. I think they're having a moving sale, so I think maybe you can find some of this for cheaper than you usually can. I got these on sale before, but so it has like the scripture session at the, or scripture section at the top, and an attribute of God, and then you write your notes, and then remember this, and a prayer at the bottom. So I've been filling it up every day, and I really like having all of my notes and thoughts in one place. And there's I think 4 volumes of this, and it has a book, a breakdown of not necessarily a devotional, but like a summary of each scripture broken down. So I've been doing that in the podcast and in this, so it's been very helpful. So like I said, I'm behind, but I'm still trucking along. So anyways, that is my reading wrap up for February and March. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. See you in the next one. Bye.